couple people kind of came at me initially with questions that I felt were hostile, kind of the way they were just said. But as soon as we talked, like, I realized that it wasn't hostile, it was just not knowing.
Among the many things in our society that lots of people don't know about, but I think have lots of questions, is around the question of transgender. What is it? What does that mean? I had an opportunity to sit down with Heidi Richards, who's a wonderful person and the mother of a transgendered child. So this podcast, which is in two parts, is a conversation with Heidi about what's it like to raise a child. And in the first section, we talk about all kinds of things of just that whole coming to understand and learn that you have a child that, in this case, although on the outside the appearance was of a girl, identified himself as a boy. And so we talk about those early conversations and the dilemma that faced in terms of interacting with people in schools. And then in part two, we get into some more of the physical questions and some of the theological questions. But it's an opportunity here in this conversation, and I learned so much from talking with Heidi about what this is like and the joys and beauty and wonder of being the parent of a transgendered child.
I have two children. They were both born girls. They're 2 years apart. And my second child, my youngest child, was born Leah Faith, and is now Liam James. And that came after a lot of discussion, actually starting around age 2, which people think that's really young. But around age 2, he started insisting, I'm not a girl. And yeah.
He started to say, I'm a boy.
I'm a boy. And the funny thing is, you know how on Facebook, memories, they give you like memories, pictures and things that you might have posted 5-10 years ago. So the other day, it was just this past week, I had posted something when Liam was Leah and was 3 and kept saying to me, Mommy, I wish I was a girl like Eiley, her sister. And I thought at the time, like, that struck me as so odd, like, you are a girl. And I had like put a thing on Facebook like, wow, I never thought I would have to tell my kids what gender they are, but here's my child saying, I wish I was a girl like Eiley. And I, had forgotten about it. And then it came up last week. And so I reposted it and I said, wow, like, hindsight being 2020, I should have recognized more like what he was trying to tell me then. And so my kids had gone to preschool actually at Trinity, and the preschool teacher saw it on Facebook this past week and commented and said, Heidi, do you remember when she was in preschool? So Liam was there at 2 and 3 years old in their program. And I used to tell you that he would say, or she at the time, would say with insistence every day, Miss Tanya, I used to be a boy. And Miss Tanya would say, no, you were always a girl. Like, do you think you were a boy because you had short hair? Because babies have short hair? Nope, I used to be a boy. And I had forgotten about this. Was like an almost daily exchange with the teacher when I would pick him up, her at the time. And we just kind of thought, well, that's a silly thing to say. But the teacher said now, 5 years later, it always struck me as a very odd thing for a young child to say. There was so much conviction behind it that it seemed strange to her. And then my dad commented on that same Facebook memory post and said, Heidi, I remember when she was 2 and it was Christmas, and I asked her a few weeks before Christmas, what do you want for Christmas? And she said, only boys' toys. I don't want girls' toys, only boys' toys, and only boys' clothes. And again, at the time, it didn't stand out to us, but when she put all of these things together with the, hindsight, I guess, really is 2020. Once you put all of those things together, it's made an interesting picture looking back.
Okay, so now I'm imagining a lot of people listening to this for the first time are going, Okay, I'm confused, and I'm sure you were also. So I want to ask a whole bunch of questions that are going to be really ignorant questions.
That is totally okay. I probably heard them all.
Right, because it seems like you're really open about this, and yes. Liam is also, and which is really helpful for a lot of people. So. So first of all, let's just kind of get a sketch of who you are, your family, and where you live, and something like that.
So we live in Worcester, and my husband and I live with our kids, a cat and a rabbit, and I teach second grade in Shrewsbury, and I've been there forever. Almost 20 years.
And you have a long history at Camp Calumet?
Yes, I started going to Camp Calumet with my church, like for church retreats when I was maybe 6 or 7, with Emmanuel in Fitchburg. And then I started going to camp when I was 8 as a camper. And I was a camper for 7 or 8 years. And then I was on staff for a couple of years in high school. I went to Muhlenberg for college, so I was in Pennsylvania, and I stopped working at camp. And then last summer, somebody called me, or last spring, somebody from Calumet called me and said, we need someone to work in program staff. And I had still stayed involved. I do Reach the Beach and a lot of fundraisery type things for Calumet. My kids had started going to Calumet at this point. So they said, why don't you come and work in family camp this summer? So last summer, my kids went up and they went to camp for 3 weeks, and I worked there for 3 weeks. And then this summer we're going right from the end of June to the beginning of August. So we'll be there for a long time. So now my kids are campers at Calumet, which is really cool. And Eileen's staying for 2 weeks this year.
Oh,
it's a big deal.
That's great.
Yeah.
Good. So your children are how old now?
Eileen turned 10 last week, and Liam is 7.
Okay, so Liam is 7. And so you were just telling me before we got started about your wedding and so forth. So you and your husband, you have two children, Eiley and then Leah.
Yeah.
And then you were just kind of starting to kind of help us understand what happened, or maybe not what happened in the dynamics of conversation with Leah and Liam. Say a little bit more about what that was like for you early on.
So early on, having an older sister, we always assumed that Leah would just follow in what her sister liked. And we started noticing around maybe age 2, around the time when kids really start to find that voice and say no. Like that time, I would take out, boxes of her sister's old clothes that I had in the basement. And my older daughter is, if you picture like the pinkest, sparkliest, rainbowiest, glitteriest girl, that's who we have. And she just loves that stuff and always has. And so we would take out these boxes of clothing, and the glitter and the tutus would just poof out. And Leah would say, no, and wanted nothing to do with that. Started asking people, loved Spider-Man from a young age. So we're like, oh, it's cute, loves superheroes. Started asking for Spider-Man toys. Spider-Man clothing. First it was all Spider-Man birthday party. And we were like, oh, that's cute, she likes boy things. And we had, made a conscious effort not to raise our kids in a box. Like if they wanted to do traditionally girl things, that was great. Traditionally boy things, that was fine with us too. So they always had, cars and dolls. And so we thought, great, she's choosing those things, that's great. But then it just got a lot more insistent as time went on, not wanting to wear dresses, not wanting to put clips or bows in her hair, wanting short hair. And not just I want short hair, but I want hair like a boy. And it started to become a lot more consistent. And then actually the thing that kind of made me stop and go, oh, happened at Calumet this past summer. So it was Liam's, then Leah, first summer in day camp at Calumet. They'd gone to the Elm Park day camp in Worcester, the urban day camp, but that was at our church and people knew them there. But this was the first time going to some place where nobody knew of her. She wasn't old enough to go to camp in the past where her sister was.
And how old is she about this time?
She was 6.
6, okay. So first grade.
First grade, end of first grade. And so they had been going to camp, day camp, And I would pick them up when I was done work. And one day, my older daughter, who was 9 at the time, said, "Mommy, Leah's been going in the boys' changing room when it's time to change to go to the beach." They had these little changing spaces. And they were, I think they were not even really labeled boys and girls. It was like a little stall and you would go in. But she would go in the boys' one, or she would try to go in the line. "Mommy, Leah tried to go in the line to go to the boys' bathroom when the kids went to the bathroom." And then she came home another day. My older daughter came home, and by home I mean back to our camper at Calumet, and said, "Leah told everyone at camp to call her Liam. She wants to be Liam." And that was the first time that I had really like stopped and said, wow, like this isn't something that's just like, oh, you're a tomboy. I was a tomboy, but I was proud to be a girl who played on the boys' basketball team, a girl who played street hockey, a girl who climbed trees. I still was a girl.
Okay, so this is really interesting, because I was thinking that some people might be thinking the same thing. Well, this is just tomboyish, which is kind of an old school term,
right,
used fairly or unfairly for women. I know my mother grew up, in the 30s and 40s, and kind of that was kind of like something that she experienced in terms of language.
Yeah.
But this is something else.
Something else, because I never insisted that I was a boy. I climbed trees with my boy cousin. I played with the boys in the neighborhood, but I was always a girl first and foremost. I didn't like to wear dresses. If my mom wanted me to wear a dress to church, I was not happy about that. But I still would tell you I was a girl if you asked. And, still had some like markedly feminine traits, I think, despite wanting to climb trees and play in the mud. But Liam started insisting I'm a boy. I am a boy. I want to be a boy. And just a lot of interest in, like, I have a cousin who has little boys who are younger than my kids, and I would babysit them, or they would come over, and just like a lot of interest in, like, how are they a boy? Like, a lot of interest like that. And we were like, okay, that's kind of weird. Like, what's that about? And then
were those questions specifically anatomical questions?
Specifically anatomical.
Okay.
Kind of, wanting to know, like, how do you get that?
Right.
And this was even a little bit before, maybe like 5 years old. So we were like, well, we don't have any boys in our family, so maybe, curious, like that's different. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but then just started like insisting more and insisting more. And the thing that kind of triggered us to do something about it, for lack of a better phrase, was, so my kids go to a Catholic school. We're not Catholic, obviously, but our neighborhood school has a lot of just issues, economic issues, and deteriorating building issues. And it just wasn't, when it came time for my kids to go to school, being a teacher, it wasn't a place where I necessarily thought my kids were going to get the best of what they could.
And you and your husband have the resources to be able
We had the resources to be able to pay for private school. So there's a Catholic school in our neighborhood that was well rated educationally, and we knew some people, that had older children who had gone there and had said good things. So we went there, and it's been fine. It's been a really good experience. It's a small school. I felt like my kids were really learning, really supported. But then Liam came home the first week of school this school year, so second grade, and they do, backing up a little bit, if anybody like knows anything about a lot of Catholic schools, they tend to just be a little more traditional in a lot of ways than your typical public school.
Right. Yep.
So like the education is more traditional, but also like I teach in a public school. I went to a public school. When I was in school, there was a boy line and a girl line. There was the girl table in the cafeteria and the boy table. Public schools, at least in my experience, and I've worked in 4 or 5, don't do that anymore. Everybody's just mixed. But their Catholic school still does that. Boy line, girl line, boy table, girl table. Until not too long ago, boy side of the playground, girl side of the playground.
Really?
Yes. Yes, that changed when my older daughter was in pre-K. That changed then. So that's still more of a thing there. So school starts, and Leah was still going by Leah at the time. was coming home and saying that my teacher is letting me sit at the boy table, which we thought was great because all of her friends have always been boys. Has had, really no connection with girls, just never latched onto any girls as playmates. So, like, great, she's letting you sit with your friends. That's fantastic. So, this is still the first week of school. So we're still getting used to everything. I'm coming home one day and I'm driving to the school to pick up my kids. I get there and one of the teachers in the after school program comes out and she's like horrified. And so I was like, she's like, did the principal talk to you? And I was like, no, something happened. And she's like, I can't tell you. Here's her cell phone number. You have to call her. So now, of course, like, worst case scenario is going through my head, right? Like, oh my goodness, what has happened? What did my child do? Like, oh my goodness. So I call her when I get in the car. And first I asked my kids, what did either of you do today that I need to know about before I have this conversation with your principal? Because I don't want to find out from her that you've done something wrong. They both insisted. We did nothing wrong. We did nothing wrong. Nothing happened today. I didn't get in trouble. Okay. So I call her and she says, I need to talk to you. Okay. I really don't want to do this over the phone, but I had to go to a meeting, so I need to talk to you. It's really important. I don't even know how to say this. This is horrible. Okay. Your daughter told someone on the playground that she's going to be a boy when she grows up. And I'm waiting. And they're like, and? There was no and. That was like, anyway, it became this huge thing. The child, I guess, had gone home. This had happened the day before. The child had gone home, told her parents that
the child that Liam had
told that he wanted to be a boy someday. Told her parents that this girl in my class said she wants to be a boy when she grows up, and said that she is a boy. And the parents came to school crying, and told the principal that they send their kids to a Catholic school to keep them away from those people, was what we were told. Which immediately sent me into like this apoplectic.
Yeah, you're pretty composed about it right now, but I can imagine at the time you were not. So
there was a lot of yelling, and it was really awkward because there was a big Virgin Mary statue next to me because we were in the Catholic school when we went back to meet with them, and I felt really awkward, like coming unhinged in front of like this religious.
Coming unhinged in front of Virgin Mary.
Yes, I did. So
it's a good thing for Lutherans to do.
So they already knew us as the non-Catholic family, and then we come. So I ended up the next day. The principal was so insistent this was a problem that my husband and I made the decision not to put our kids in school the next day. That it was a Friday. We were going to have them stay with their grandparents. We were going to go to the school, sort this out, and then bring the kids back to school. But we didn't want them to go in, to the lion's den, so to speak, without us knowing what was going on here. So we go to this meeting, and it's the principal and the teacher and the Virgin Mary, and they have this conversation with us about how like this is not okay, that this is what your child said, and that she was bringing, how did she say it? Like sexualizing the playground. And I was like, there's first of all a big difference between sex and gender. And
this is at grade
2.
Okay.
And saying I want to be a boy or I'm going to be a boy when I grow up, I don't think is sexualizing anything. It's just a statement like me saying at that age, I want to be a mom when I grow up. Like maybe I did. Maybe I was going to be an astronaut. Like who knows? You don't know. So we ended up talking to them for a while, and they kept insisting, you need to talk to the priest. I'm like, I'm not going to talk to the priest. I'm not even Catholic. I'm not going to talk to the priest. You need to talk to the priest. But we finally left it that, Catholic school wasn't for everybody, was what we were told, but they were committed to educating our child. So we decided we got the forms to release their records from the school, but then my older daughter has been there forever, and she was really happy. She was really entrenched with her friends. She's 10. So we decided to let it go for a while and see what happened. And it settled out. And it's been pretty settled. It's not the ideal situation right now.
Okay, so you're still there.
We're still there.
All right.
Only because in Worcester, you can't school choice within the school year. We would have to go to our neighborhood school, which is the school that I didn't want, or another Catholic school, which I don't know if I would want to go down that road someplace else. At least here, they already knew what we were about. And
now, do you find this happened when, by the way, just like
September?
Oh, so recently, so
yeah,
less than 4 months ago. And so, are you finding yourself in a role of helping to educate them?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. We had a lot of conversations with the principal and the teacher, and the teacher's been wonderful, and she's been super supportive. It's more like kind of like a diocese thing. Right. More than like the classroom teacher thing.
And I would imagine also the reaction of the parents of the other children.
Yes.
Because they're trying to figure out how do they talk with their second grade.
Yes.
This is a lot of conversation for second graders, and it sounds like
they're
doing better than the adults.
They are.
And which is maybe also reflective of our general society. We can talk about that later. But
yeah.
That's...
And you know, it's interesting you say like educating, because I've been very open about it. I've been open about it on social media with Liam's permission. I shared our story with people. And through that, I've met a lot of people who were in the same kind of situation, but also people, because I, interact with some people from the school community on social media, saw this, and they texted me or sent me messages saying like, how can we talk to our child about this? We want to support your child. How can we be supportive? So despite the administration's stand in the school, the parent community has been great. And there's this really great children's book called I Am Jazz. I don't know if you've heard of Jazz Jennings.
I Am Jazz.
Jazz Jennings. So Jazz Jennings was one of the first, she's transgender, born a male, and is now a female. I believe is like an older teenager now, but was one of the first cases in the United States that kind of went to court in a lot of ways to argue for rights for transgender individuals, and was really just out there. Did a lot of like talk show kinds of things early on to try to educate people about what was going on in her life. But she wrote a children's book called I Am Jazz about her whole process as a child of coming to realize that she wasn't necessarily like other kids. So we have a copy of that book. We had gone to the GEMS clinic in Boston, which I can tell you about after if you want. And they were the first gender clinic in the United States. There's about 40 now, but they were the first one. And they had given us a list of like age appropriate books, and that was one of them. So we've lent that book out a half dozen times now to friends at school, or just other friends, not even friends from school, but kids that they play with because I'm friends with their parents, just so the parents could have like a stepping off point to talk to their kids.
What is a stepping point?
Just like, I feel like a lot of the parents that I've talked to just don't even know how to begin having the conversation. And the way the book talks about it, and it's written from a child's point of view, so it's written from like maybe an 7 or 8 year old's point of view, is that the child in the book is a boy initially, but they say a girl brain and a boy body is how the child in the book describes it. Okay. That my brain likes girl things, my brain thinks it's a girl, but I have the body of a boy. And I think a lot of parents have found that that's a good place to kind of start. Like, okay, like what you see looks like a girl, but what's inside, the feelings inside aren't necessarily feeling like I'm a girl. Like inside, Leah is feeling like I'm not a girl, I'm a boy. And sometimes people say like in the wrong body. I don't think it's the wrong body. That was the body that she was meant to have. But, it's just a different body, and it doesn't necessarily match what's going on internally.
So that's a helpful starting conversation with parents with children.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would imagine, too, for adults, the very first time to kind of think about this, that's an okay point to start at. Okay.
And I've talked to some like older adults that we're friends with. I find like 20-year-olds, like, my nieces and nephews are in their 20s. Like, they kind of grew up with LGBTQ rights and people just more visible than people that grew up in the 60s or 70s or even in the 80s, really. So I've been able to kind of use that to have some conversations with people that are older and haven't had as much experience. Because I think like with anything, if you don't know somebody who's in a certain group, it's kind of like you can push that to the side. Like it's not super important, or I don't need to educate myself about that. But once you know somebody, then it's personal. You know somebody who's gay, or you know somebody who's transgender, or you know somebody who's done this or that. Like then it's more personal to you. Like,
well, and I think in our society today, you could also add race to that. I mean,
absolutely.
So I know someone who is African American, as opposed to just seeing portraits of them on television.
There's so many things like HIV.
Right.
You know somebody who's HIV positive. You're going to have a different view of that than if you're just hearing about that on the news. So I think knowing Leah, or now Liam, a lot of people, it's hard to hate something when you see a child in front of you. You can't. He's adorable and so cute, and he wears little bow ties, and you can't hate that. So it's easier almost, I think, for people to kind of put their guard down a little bit and be a little bit more open than maybe they would have been. And a couple people kind of came at me initially with questions that I felt were hostile, kind of the way they were just said. But as soon as we talked, like, I realized that it wasn't hostile, it was just not knowing. And what I kind of feel like in the beginning, I had my guard up so much that I was automatically looking for hostility.
Well, so give me an example of that.
Like somebody saying like, well, I thought you had 2 girls. That's not right. Like, well, I do have 2 girls.
Almost the implication of there's fault here.
Or people said, like, because I had mentioned earlier, we always kind of let them make their own path with what they wanted to play with. And Liam always chose the boy stuff early on. Or somebody saying to me like, well, maybe you shouldn't have let him dress like a boy and have a Spider-Man birthday party when he was 2. Maybe if you hadn't done that, this never would have happened. And I was like,
ouch.
I don't know. So things like that.
So then the thinking behind that is that this is a behavioral activity that you or others have done to shape your child in a certain direction.
Right, almost like we made poor parenting choices that led my child to this place.
Okay, so let me play the ignorant parent here and say, okay, well, help me understand, what is it? Like, I guess a lot of people would want to say, well, why has this happened? And so we think about it behaviorally, but you've probably come a long ways, and no, that's not how it is, not how we think about it.
No, and like I said, it's only through looking back through his entire life that I'm able to see the pieces of the puzzle and how they've been there really all along, but I maybe didn't see them for what they were in isolation. But once you're stepping back and looking at 7 years and see all these things, when you put them all together, then it's like, oof. So one of the things in the transgender community, talking about whether somebody is a child, is transgender, are the words insistent, persistent, and consistent. So, when I was little, maybe one time I dressed up as a boy, and we played wedding with a friend, and I was the boy, but that wasn't consistent. I wasn't always playing the boy, or I wasn't insisting that I was the boy. But looking back over Liam's life, he's consistently identified with male things, consistently said, I'm a boy. I didn't remember this, but my dad said that he wanted to be called Liam. He said long ago, before we had even decided to make a social change, that I want to be Liam, not Leah. And that was the name that he chose for himself. We didn't choose that name. But just looking back, the things like at preschool, saying I used to be a boy at age 2, and the teacher being like, it's odd, it sounds odd. She's really like certain that she used to be a boy, and I can't get her to see that she was never a boy. And I had forgotten about those conversations, and then when they come back up, you're like, oh. Or like her second birthday party was a Spider-Man party, and it was all boy things, although I had a Spider-Man dress made because I was like, she's going to wear a dress to our birthday party. Or things like I always insisted that my kids wore a dress to church on Easter. And last Easter, so she would have been 6 at the time, I insisted on wearing a dress. And I look at, he took it off right after church before he went to the grandparents' house. It's like, I am not wearing this anymore. But the other day I was looking through some pictures to gather some pictures of the kids through my phone, and that picture was on there. And I was like, what was I thinking? It looks like a boy in a dress. But like, I don't know if I was grasping at straws or what. But so it's just that insistent, consistent, persistent. All along, he's been maybe trying to tell us this in some way. And
you're convinced that this is not something that he decided at a certain age because he saw something. This is really the core of his being.
Yes, from as soon as he could talk, as soon as he could express want for things or express dislike for things, like the no phase of toddlerhood was very much no towards the pink and the sparkly, very much kind of put off when people gave those things as gifts or, clothing or anything like that. Just no, and wanting to wear like boy character shirts. But even right down to the social piece of just, for the longest time, Liam as Leah didn't have any friends. And being my second child, I knew that when my older child went to school, there were invitations for play dates and invitations for birthday parties, and sometimes more than you could handle as a parent. And I was like, wow, it's odd. She's not getting those. Like, she's not asking to play with people. And come to find out that she didn't like to play with the girls. She didn't like to play. He'll sometimes play Barbies with her sister, but as a preschooler, didn't like to play with the girls, wanted to play with the boys, but at the time appeared very female still, physically, long hair and girl clothes, and they were like, no, this is for the boys. So Leah would just sit by herself at the fence at recess, and the teacher would tell me this, so I would ask, are you okay? Like, do you want to play with? No, I just like sitting alone. I don't want to. And it wasn't until we started letting Leah cut her hair short, wear boy clothes, kind of fit in more socially as a male, that he started having friends and having play dates with people. Still doesn't really get invited to the parties the way his sister does, because unfortunately birthday parties are very gendered, I think, at that age. The boys tend to invite the boys, the girls invite the girls, and Liam doesn't fit in either of those boxes really. But then, socially it's been hard, and always has navigated towards the boys. Really, it was like organized sports that helped the most.
Really?
Yeah, which was surprising. He started playing flag football last year in like a city league, and met some kids, and still looked girlier, had longer hair then, but found people that he kind of had stuff in common with. And then this year played flag football again, totally looking like a boy now. And the kids on the team were mostly the same kids from last year, and they were like, cool. And then started playing basketball with some kids from school, and playing ice hockey. And those things have led to a lot more connections. I don't know if it's just like having something in common with people.
Would you say the other kids, that for them it's not as big of a deal?
It's not as big of a deal at all. Like, they'll just be like, Leah, and I'll say, we like Liam now. Okay, Liam. They're fine. And even the funny thing was, before this whole thing had happened with the school, we were playing with some friends. They live on a farm in Rutland, and the kids were all playing outside, and there's chickens, and there were 2 little girls there that my kids hadn't met before, but I was friends with their mom. So their mom knew that I had 2 girls as well. And her children were insisting, like, he. And their mom was like, no, that's a girl. And they were like, no, it's a boy. So they were kind of already seeing him that way. And I started noticing too around this fall that anytime we were someplace, now that he looked more male and people were assuming male, just how like lit up he got and how happy and how excited. And I had a friend watch my kids when I was going to run a race in Boston on Columbus Day, and they went to go meet with some friends who also have a farm, a lot of farm friends, and they were playing, and the other kids assumed male, and she went to go correct them, but then she said, I didn't, because I noticed how happy he looked when the other kids said he, so I didn't say anything. I hope that's okay. And I was like, that's totally fine.
Children. Maybe there is something to that saying that somebody a long time ago said, and a child shall lead them. In part 2, I want to ask Heidi some questions that I didn't know how to ask about more in terms of the details of what are the connections that she made in terms of medical help and psychological help. And also, when we get to the end, we have this opportunity to talk about the theological. But that's in part 2 of this episode of the Bishop on a Bike podcast.